people like to do in their spare time? Now I don't want you to shout out what you like to do in your spare time. I expect, just looking around now, I expect, it'll be ranging from train spotting to skydiving, won't it? I think it will be, won't it? I mean, who doesn't like a good bit of skydiving now and again? I mean, come on. I've done a bit of research, actually, and I've found the top 5 hobbies that people like to do. And coming in at number 5 is television. Is television a hobby? It's more like a torture, isn't it, sometimes? But anyway, it's in there, I don't know. Crafting, that's number 4. Not being crafty, but making stuff, quilts and crocheting and modelling or whatever you want to do. Fishing is the biggest outdoor sport, far bigger than football ever would or ever could dream to be, believe it or not. Then we have travelling, now a bit like television really. Is it travelling a hobby? But apparently it's there. And coming in at number one, any guesses? Reading as a hobby. Now I hardly do any of those things. I may do a bit of TV watching sometimes, but I'm not a big anything else. Certainly not fishing, I don't know. Anyway, but I like to think the thing that I do the most in my spare time, I like to think it could be considered as a hobby. I think I might be slightly stretching the definition here. But when I'm not working, when I'm not sleeping, I like to think of eating and drinking as my hobby. Whether it's a meal out, a meal in, picking up a Costa, it's all good stuff, isn't it? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not promoting gluttony or anything like that. Everything in the right amounts. But isn't eating and drinking simply the best? Isn't it really? I mean, is that just me? I don't know. Maybe I am a glutton, and I don't know anyway. But by the way, help yourselves to tea and coffee and cake, by the way, and throughout the service, so that's fine. And this morning we're starting a new preaching series, not specifically about eating and drinking, but it has a large eating and drinking component to it. So if you, for some strange reason, don't like eating and drinking at all, then I can only apologise for you being weird. In the book of Romans, chapter 12, verse 13, we read, "Share with the Lord's people who are in need. Practice hospitality." This morning and throughout the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at the subject of hospitality. So, what is hospitality? Many years ago, in a church that I belonged to, a questionnaire was given out to try and help you discover what spiritual gifts you may have. I don't know whether any of you have filled out such a questionnaire. And like any questionnaire, it had its limitations and was only intended as a guide and not to be a concrete decision-making tool. However, the first problem encountered was that hospitality was on the questionnaire, even though it's not a spiritual gift, but I'll speak about that a little bit later on. The second problem was people's idea or concept of what hospitality was. You see, the vast majority of people scored themselves very highly. I mean, I think the questionnaire was sort of ranging from 0, no sort of hospitality, to 5, being almost probably like Jesus, I don't know. But, and the average was people were coming in at 4s and 5s. And I thought this was quite strange, really. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, all these people could have been practicing hospitality. It's just that I wasn't getting invited anywhere, because I didn't want to be hospitality to me. But the thing is I found it strange because most would either complain about nobody coming to visit them or not thinking to invite anyone around, or, and this is maybe the or more, because we've got a British culture, haven't we, is that they were very happy to keep themselves to themselves, not wanting any visitors or not wanting to visit or be with other people. I expect they may have got hospitality mixed up with hospitable, thinking that all you need to do is to sort of smile at people occasionally and make pleasant conversation on a Sunday morning. Maybe that's what they were thinking about. The simple definition of the word hospitality, according to Oxford, is the friendly and generous reception and entertainment of guests, visitors, or strangers. The Greek word is philoxenia, and this is made up of two different words: philos, which means loving, and xenos, which means stranger. So philoxenia, literally loving strangers. The biblical concept of hospitality is so much more than just entertainment of guests, to the point that it really isn't nothing to do with entertainment at all. Entertainment is mainly about putting on airs and graces, and it shoots for the making of good impressions. Whereas hospitality should be about opening our arms and our doors wide with a transparent love for each one of us and for a lost world. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 13, we read, "Keep on loving one another as brothers and sisters. Do not forget to show hospitality to strangers, for by doing so, some people have shown hospitality to angels without even knowing it." Biblical hospitality is about showing our love for each other, and that can be achieved in many, many different practical ways. The Latin word hosp, and that means host, and it's the basis for the word hospitality. And essentially, it's the relationship between a host and a guest. Hospitality can take many forms, but the major theme throughout the Bible is a person being a good host to their guests. And it's not just doing that when unexpected guests arrive. It's about inviting guests as well. As the writer of Hebrews says, when we do that, we might have even entertained angels. Biblical hospitality, like I've already said, it does have a large eating and drinking component to it. Like me, Jesus liked his food and drink. Jesus liked to socialise. I mean, we may not have thought about Jesus in this way, but Jesus was a fun guy to be around. You wanted him at your party. He was the number one. He was the number one guest. He liked to have a good time. I mean, he may have even told a good joke I don't know. But he ate and he drank with many people. He got invited, didn't he, to many people's houses, and he even invited himself to other people's houses. Obviously, our culture here it's something that I probably wouldn't recommend you do yourselves. But Jesus did it, didn't he? Well, he did it because he was Jesus. Well, he could get away with it, didn't he? But that's not the reason exactly, and we'll find out why when we look at Zacchaeus next week, when Jesus invited himself to Zacchaeus' house. Jesus was even accused of being a glutton and a drunkard. Such was his reputation for socialising. In the book of Matthew chapter 11 we read, "The Son of Man," that's Jesus, "came eating and drinking, and they say, 'Here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners.' But wisdom is proved right by her deeds." There was no truth in these accusations, but Jesus was accused all the same. The Jewish culture has, and I think it still has as well, a culture of hospitality with a strong focus on eating and drinking. There were many feasts in Jesus' time that the people observed. We have the well-known one that we know is the Passover, when we share communion with each other. That's based on Passover. There's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of First Fruits, the Feast of Weeks. Feast of Weeks, that's another name for Pentecost, which Hannah did some research for me, and apparently Pentecost is next week. We also have the Feast of Trumpets, where they blew trumpets, and also ate as well, but not at the same time, obviously. And the Feast of the Day of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles, just to name but a few. They loved to feast, didn't they? They were feasting and drinking and celebrating. Food and meals were so essential to the Jewish experience, and Jesus, being a Jew himself, that was no exception. If you read in the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible, there were many important events that happened around meals. Eating was considered a sacred act, and sacred in this context was to mean a connection to God or a dedication to God. Eating was not just a biological need, but a way to be transformed into a sort of a social activity, leading to a community of intimacy and shared experience. It was a time for fellowship and significant conversation. Kindness was, or it still is, the basic mood of a Jewish meal. It was considered an opportunity to teach and learn, among many other things. The rabbis used to say, if people eat together and Torah talk is not exchanged, then the meal is a vain enterprise. The Jewish people also had a lot of do's and don'ts, didn't they, with regards to what not to eat, how to eat it. But with the coming of Jesus, everything was made permissible. Because there was a good mix of Jews and Gentiles in the early church, when the Apostle Paul spoke about what somebody should eat or drink according to their faith, he was speaking more about being culturally sensitive than abiding by a whole lot of new rules. The Apostle Paul tells us to practice hospitality, and in the New Testament there are so many examples of what that should look like. In the Gospel of Luke, in Luke alone, there are 9 chapters where Jesus is eating and drinking, but either being a host or a guest. There are many verses in the Bible that speak about Jesus being involved in hospitality. And we'll be looking at them in this series. So who should be involved? Who should be involved in practicing hospitality? And is this activity only reserved for people who have been given a gift in it? Well, first of all, I said I'd revisit it. Contrary to popular belief, hospitality isn't a spiritual gift, but it is a means through which other spiritual gifts are displayed, such as mercy, serving, encouragement, giving. There's also room, isn't there, for teaching, I've just said, and even prophesying as well. If hospitality was a spiritual gift, then it may be something that we think that we may not need to do, because it would depend on whether God has given us the gift or not. However, Paul tells us that we need to practice hospitality, not to ask God for a gifting in it. I think the idea that hospitality is a gift probably comes from the book of 1 Peter, chapter 4, verse 9 to 10, where it says, "Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms." Here we have hospitality mentioned, and then it leaps straight into talking about gifts. But it's not saying that it's a gift. It's only saying that we should do it without grumbling. Hospitality is even a biblical mandate given to overseers, given to the leaders of the church, and hopefully through the example of overseers and leaders that the rest of the fellowship follow. In the book of 1 Timothy chapter 3 we read, "Here is a trustworthy saying. Whoever aspires to be an overseer desires a noble task. Now the overseer is to be above reproach, faithful to his wife, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable." He goes on with loads of other things as well. Hospitality can be practiced by anyone. It's not just for people that are married. It's not just for people with large homes. It's not just for people who are financially comfortable or well off. The Apostle Paul, he was single, he had little means, and he didn't own his own home. He sets us a good example when he was in Rome under house arrest. In the book of Acts we read, for 2 whole years, Paul stayed there in his own rented house and welcomed all who came to see him. Biblical hospitality relies on all demographics, all personalities and incomes. The most hospitable Christians are often those with a great love but meagre means. In this series, we'll be covering quite a few different aspects of hospitality. And hopefully we'll be expanding on some of the brief points I've already made today as well. So if you feel I've jumped a little bit and you want a bit more explanation into them, then hopefully they'll be provided as we journey through this. Some of the topics to include, just to whet your appetites, so to speak, eating and drinking with the lost, which is a way to spread the gospel to everyone. Connecting with our neighbours, and the question is, who are our neighbours? Are our neighbours just the people that are next door to us? Food as justice, thinking about the poor, food banks, fair trade, things like that. Church around the table, the fellowship that we can all have together. A time to celebrate. We all know, don't we, that Jesus liked a good party. After all, he did make quite a bit of wine at a wedding, didn't he? And we'll also be looking at the special meal we can have together with a particular focus when we remember Jesus dying for us. Finally, this morning, hopefully you will begin to realise that hospitality is something that we should all be involved in. The early church grew spiritually and numerically by practicing hospitality. In the book of Acts we read, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favour of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. As a fellowship, do we want to emulate the successes of the early church? You may answer no, but I hope you don't. So hopefully, over the next few weeks, we can begin to discover together the real meaning of Christian hospitality, with maybe just a little eating and drinking along the way. Let's pray. Oh yes, Lord, you teach us what it is to be hospitable. You teach us the way of hospitality. And Lord, I just pray over the next few months that our hearts and minds will be open to receive what you want to teach each one of us. It may be a challenge, it may just be an encouragement. Holy Spirit, we just want to be open to your leading and directing and prompting. And we just thank you and praise your name. Please, we're just going to finish with one last